Hey guys, Chris here with Work2Game, and today I'd like to talk a little bit about just the role of news coming out with people dealing with loot boxes and dealing with just corporations not feeling happy at all. But mostly what I want to talk about in this video is that there has been a long-running accusation, even in the back of my mind, I 100% have believed this, that Apple slows down phones once the new one comes out. So I am on an iPhone 6 because I wanted a headphone jack, and I've always been on the mains. So I think a 2 was probably my first one, so I've had a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, and a 6. So I've had a lot of iPhones. And I wanted to roll to the 7, but not without my headphone jack. I use it all the time. And so, when they dropped the CD drive in laptops, I was like, now that I think about it, I haven't used mine. And when I got a laptop with that one, I didn't miss it. But now it just feels like they're taking things away and seeing if we will miss it. And so things like the USB drives in my newest laptop and taking away the headphone jack in a phone, I didn't even have to try it to not do that. Which means now it is the 8. And it feels like it went from being a good phone to an average phone to now it is an utter piece of junk. And so there's a common question of, are they doing what's called planned obsolescence? Now, planned obsolescence is where there is a date in the future or a range in the future where you expect this device to no longer be necessary, like an expiration date. And it's not something we don't live without. Things like car batteries are incredibly good at planned obsolescence. They go out on that date, no matter how much you seem to use them, they just do. And we all agree to that. It's a contract. It basically allows a company to reduce the cost because you know that you don't want it to last forever. So if we agree on a date up front or a kind of amount of use up front, they can cut costs of trying to add longevity to an item we don't want to pay for that longevity on, and we can still get what we expect. But the problem with planned obsolescence is that there must be that level of transparency. Otherwise, it just feels like they're conning you, they're pot committing you, and then later they're going to be asking for more money. You just don't know when, you don't know how much, and you don't know any way of planning around it, right? You don't know, oh my gosh, it's going to fail while I'm on vacation or whatever. So there's, with a car battery, if you know that you're going to go take a road trip across America and you've only got 2 months left on your car battery, you know to go ahead and replace it now rather than wait, or plan on replacing it at one of the many places along the way that would carry that item. So Apple has been kind of beating around the bush on this, and it sounds like they've finally given us the answer. And their official answer is no, there is no planned obsolescence. However, they understand that lithium-ion technology, which is the safest and easiest to produce battery, so that's why we still use lithium-ion in phones. There was a little Galaxy issue where they tried branching out on battery technology to a more face-warming method. And I'm sure you heard about that. So we don't want that. We don't want there to be, phones exploding, phones catching fire, when batteries start to malfunction, or even when they are functioning. One of the things they struggle with is giving off heat. I've worked in and around the medical device industry, and heat is a big issue, especially when you talk about something that's going to be on somebody's body, which is a phone or medical device. And so lithium-ion technology is what they use. And the problem with that is as it goes through a number of cycles over its life, that battery really needs to be replaced. And when it doesn't get replaced, it can fail suddenly. It can shut off, it can, and there's all these different things. And so one of the things they do from a software engineering standpoint is they seem to assume, from the way I'm reading this, and it goes in a decent amount of depth, but I still had questions, is it basically says, okay, we know that iPhone 6 have gone through enough cycles now, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to intentionally put in something that safeguards your software from requesting too much power, which is basically slowing it down. So they're not trying to make the phone obsolete, and it doesn't seem to have anything to do necessarily with new hardware releases, though it may have something to do with new software releases. As software updates, they're saying, hey, 6s should be a little careful, they've got a lot of cycles on them, they never had the hardware to run this, they're going to generate lots of heat, so let's just slow it down a little bit. And my issue with that is they seem to slow down whether or not I update, so maybe that's like a soft update that's being rolled out without me having to accept it, and that a lot of people say they get so much better if you replace the battery, but this makes me wonder, does it track the number of cycles on a battery? So if I replace the battery, it really does make it a brand new iPhone 6 again, and it can run however fast that hardware can spec whatever update it's on? Or is the counter in there. Like, imagine that I keep track of the number of times you make toast. And so you're making this toast every morning, but I base it on how much bread I see coming into the house on the receipts, right? So as the toaster gets older, we agree, hey, it may take a little longer to make your toast because we don't want it to overheat and burn the house down. Fine. But if I go get a new toaster and I'm still tracking off the original bread count, I'm not going to reduce that time again, even though the new toaster should be more than capable of it. So I have some issues with this. I don't know if you guys do. I still feel like it's kind of beating around the bush, and my biggest issue with this is that there was a lack of transparency. Even if this was the thing, they should have come out and said, hey, look at this thing we did. Here was the problem. Here was our solution. And it's the best of what's available at the time. And if a better solution comes along that makes sense on our scale, we'll try that then. I think that's putting a lack of loyalty. It's putting a lack of trust in the loyalty of your customers. Similar to other corporations this year that have been burned by this, giving us all the information. Sometimes I think companies, especially these big AAA gaming companies we've been talking about this year, they don't give us the whole story on how much content a game is going to have or how that content's going to be gated in the future. And so we buy, and then when it turns out not to be what we expected, we get mad. And they don't trust that if they gave us all the information, we would be these willing partners where it's like, oh, cool, that's still enough for me as long as you're going to continue doing more in the future. Just trust us. Instead, you end up with, if you get 100 customers by conning all of them, and you piss 70 of them off, right? So now you've only got 30 loyal customers left, and you'd been transparent with us, maybe you would have still sold 90 copies. And then all 90 of them wouldn't have felt screwed over by you. So that's kind of my issue with it. And then what's interesting is right after all this hits, Apple enacted a new change regarding loot boxes. Now they have to reveal odds. This is something that I understand other countries already do with anything that resembles gambling, and we do with things like when you go to McDonald's and it has like the little like Monopoly guys that peel off your cup. There's a little disclaimer that says what your odds of winning are, is purchase necessary, does purchase increase chance of winning, and usually the answer is no to all those things. And I imagine that once you get classified as that, revenue generated from it, losses generated from any of that, I imagine they're taxed differently, but I am no expert, because it seems like we tax everything else differently, so why would we not? So them putting this on here, it mostly affects for them, like Hearthstone is a big one, and Business Insider did this. It's incredibly interesting, and seeing New York Times cover this and Business Insider cover this means all of these issues where the population is mad at a corporation for feeling screwed over, whether or not it's gaming, are getting noticed. Sometimes I think we feel that if we don't express our opinion, nobody cares, and that's not the case. So I think it's interesting that Apple's kind of taking a charge on this, and you could see similar things roll out over other areas, like, you know, Battlefront, you know, the game that we no longer name on here anymore, which just had another update that caused even more issues because they just misstepped again. You see these games come out with loot crates and other forms of ways of monetizing, and if they're not transparent in what that is, then it just makes people mad. And it's people that may have been willing to purchase it, and it's people who may have been willing to not purchase it and not care. There's plenty of times I'm in a game like Final Fantasy, and I see people on mounts that cost money, and I don't care. I think it's awesome to see those mounts. I don't have any of them. That's okay. But if those came from some form of content where it just seemed to favor people that paid, or if those did something or gated, or if there was any ounce of secrecy there, I might feel differently. So this is a lot of issues. We talked about Apple phone slowing down. We talked about Apple making loot crates illegal, or the term loot crate, and without showing the odds. And so not illegal, but definitely shifting that way towards making them less gambling to minors. And we talked about kind of just how that impacts everything, and I would love to know what you guys think. My name's Chris with Work2Game, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for watching this video. If you want to check out any other videos, you should click over here. And then we've got like some kind of vlog thing down here in the corner. And then then we've got like subscribe. Have you get like that's really you should totally do it. This was a complete disaster.